Hey there, welcome back to the Savvy Painter podcast. I'm your host, Antrese, and today we are diving into something that comes up a lot for artists. We're going to talk about rejection. If you've ever avoided applying to a show, reaching out to a gallery, or even just sharing your work online because you were afraid of hearing no, or more specifically, you were afraid of how it would make you feel, this episode is for you. Let's start with the truth. Rejection hurts, but it's not dangerous. It feels dangerous, but that feeling, that's not coming from the no itself. It's coming from the story that your brain tells you about that no. So today, we're going to talk about what really happens in your brain and body when you face rejection, how to move through it, and why doing it in community changes everything. So let's go. Here's what I see a lot in Growth Studio. Artists will say, I don't want to apply to that because I cannot handle the rejection right now. But when we dig in, it's not the rejection itself that's so painful. It's the meaning that we attach to it. Things like, they didn't like my work, so I must not be any good. Or if they say no, it means that I will never make it as an artist. Or worse, for some people, the idea that if they say no, it means I just wasted all of my time making that painting, submitting the work, doing all the things. These thoughts sting. And they sting because we so often will mistake them for facts. And then we react to that idea as if it is a fact. But those thoughts are just thoughts. They are just words floating through our head, and they are completely optional. Even though I know they often really, really feel true. But the rejection itself, it's just a no. It's just data. But here's what happens. We hear the no, or we read the no, we experience the no, we get a no. And then we instantly create all these stories around it. And usually those stories are pretty cruel. They are a reflection of our worst fears about ourselves. So in our imagination, the second that the juror saw that piece, they instantly said no. Not just no, but God, no. And then they turned to another juror and giggled at our audacity for sending that piece in. All sorts of emotions will surface from that. Really ugly and uncomfortable emotions that you'd rather not feel. Most of us would rather not feel it. I mean, who would? They're not fun. But aside from the initial sting, the rest truly is optional. And I say it's optional because we take that initial sting and then we replay the story over and over and over and over again. And as we replay that story over and over and over and over again, we start adding things to it. Every time we replay it, we add a little detail on it. We elaborate a little bit more, or we project what will happen in the future. And so we just stay in this place where we're just fixated on how horrible it was. And we start adding all the more details. So we see the rejection, maybe it's an email, or maybe we hear it, and then we start telling the stories. Like, they didn't just say no after very careful deliberation. It was an easy no. They took one quick look and they fired off that email, and they didn't even have the courtesy to really look at my work. Right? So we've got hurt in there. We've got feeling offended, dejected, disappointed. All of that starts to add up. And now as you're adding more to the stories, you're amplifying the emotions and adding more on top of them. It's like you're really playing it out and using that brilliant artist imagination and creativity to paint a vivid picture of just how bad that no was. So much of what we experience isn't about the rejection itself. It's about how long you stay trapped in the story. And the more we think about it and the more details we add to support the meaning that we gave to that no, the longer we extend our discomfort and the more intense we will make it. And we make it more likely that we won't want to do it again because, wow, rejection is just so painful. And what's so amazing and powerful about our human brain is that it really doesn't know the difference between what we imagine and what we experience. And so we can create these very vivid, real feeling scenarios just by thinking about them. And while rejection is an example of a scenario or experience that, I don't know, most of us don't really want to have or don't really enjoy having, we can do the same thing with experiences that we do want to have. One of the artists that I work with, her name is Braley. She's in Growth Studio, and she is amazing, absolutely incredible. And she was doing something not art related, but she shared this really powerful realization during our call. She was doing her own oil and valve adjustment on her motorcycle, something that she had never done before. So she was figuring it out on her own. And in the middle of it, doubt started creeping in. And she started questioning what she was doing. Like, what if I mess it up? What if I ruin it? What if I actually can't do this? Right? She was watching YouTube videos on repeat to try to teach herself how to do the valve adjustments on her motorcycle. I mean, pause here for a moment. How badass is that? But anyway, she's double checking every step, maybe even triple checking every step and second guessing herself. But she pushed through. And not only did it work, but her motorcycle actually ran better afterwards. So her insight that she realized was, what if instead of worrying what could go wrong, I imagined what could go right? And that moment captures this whole idea perfectly. Because what if our art, our emails, our bold requests turned out better than what we thought they would? This is the power of our mind, because what we do when we imagine something and when we experience it, which is what we're doing when we are imagining something, we're actually experiencing that event, is then that triggers our brain to start to look for evidence to back that up. So if in the case of rejection, we are thinking that we're going to get rejected or that we are anticipating it, we are going to be looking for evidence to support that. But instead, if we took a cue from Braley and we imagined that this could actually turn out way better than we imagine, just play with that for a little while and see what you start to notice if you allow yourself to believe that idea. So something that we're playing with in Growth Studio right now is a rejection challenge. So for the next 2 months inside Growth Studio, we are doing this challenge and artists are working to collect 50 rejections in the next 2 months. So we just started this like a few days ago, and many of the artists are already getting more yeses than they expected. Like some of them actually said, I'm having a hard time getting no's so far. We're only a few days into it, like I said, but they're already discovering that they can be wrong, that on the whole, things often turn out much better than they thought. Not everyone is experiencing that yet, and I'm going to put a pin in that, and we're going to circle back to that in a moment because I want you to have the tools to deal with this. So this whole conversation and the experience that we're creating inside of Grow Studio with this rejection challenge isn't about never being rejected. And it's not about thinking positively and then magically you never get rejected. I'm sorry, you will be rejected at some point in your art career if you are putting yourself out there. If you are putting yourself, let's just say, in harm's way, and by in harm's way, you're risking rejection. You're risking being rejected. And the point is to not ever feel that. The point is to create some resilience around it so that you have a higher tolerance for it. And that's what we're talking about in this episode. We're going to walk through some ways for that. I'm going to show you what happens and why exposing yourself to rejection gently and with care is going to help you move through it so much faster. So first, let's talk about why it feels so huge to be rejected. So here's a little science for you. Your brain is designed to protect you. So when it senses rejection, it doesn't say, oh, that's just a gallery passing on my work. It says, danger, you might be cast out from the tribe. You might be cast out from society. This is life-threatening, right? It makes it very, very serious because, again, it doesn't know the difference between what we imagine and what is actually real. So because you are imagining this, then your body responds. And so maybe your heart starts racing, or your stomach knots up, or your brain floods your body with stress hormones trying to get you to not do the thing that it believes is dangerous. But what if, instead of taking that as the truth, that you are in danger, what if you could just sit with that sensation? And what if, instead of telling yourself stories about it, you just notice the pressure in your chest, for example, or that tingle in your arms, or a tightness in your throat? Not any stories coming from your head, just the physical sensation that you feel in your body when you have this experience called rejection. That is where the magic happens. Because when you allow yourself to feel the discomfort, instead of reacting to it, it moves through you. And then it doesn't control you anymore. It doesn't stay. It's not stuck, and you're not resisting it. The interesting thing is that emotions like rejection last about 90 seconds. That's it. There's just 90 seconds of this physical discomfort. And unless we start adding more fuel to the fire, after 90 seconds, it evaporates. But because we're human beings, we've developed these habits where we start to anticipate, we start to tell ourselves these stories, right? So when the rejection comes, instead of letting it evaporate after 90 seconds, we start imagining, without any evidence whatsoever, that the real reason is personal, or that the real reason is that you and your art are not good enough. And these stories that we tell ourselves about the rejection, and the domino effect that we imagine and create in our heads about what happens after the rejection, when everyone else finds out that you're not actually an artist, or that you're not actually talented at all, and therefore ... you fill in the blanks with whatever your mind comes up with. What happens when we do this is that we trigger our amygdala, and we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Okay, so in this case, what that might look like, what fight might look like, is getting angry about it, right? And maybe thinking something along the lines of, well, all those juror competitions, they're a fraud. They're all designed to take advantage of artists. They can't be trusted, right? Or you might experience flight, which could look like, I'm just not going to risk getting rejected anymore because these competitions are just too much. Or maybe a freeze response would look like something like just shutting down and avoiding your studio for a while or an extended period of time, because why bother at all, right? So our brain, in an effort to protect us, will exaggerate the risk and the consequences because it really, really, truly believes that rejection is just too painful, and that this is the equivalent of death. So one of the artists in Growth Studio, Allison, brought up this exact point. She said sometimes it feels like facing rejection is like facing a bear. And what she said is, the way that she's understanding it is, so then the brain will kind of get hyperactive, like scared, and it'll think, there's bears, or, you could have walked the plank. Or that rejection is something equally as bad as that, as we're walking the plank or we're facing a bear. So the brain goes straight to panic mode in that case, right? Because it's equating it with that. And Allison, she's so smart. She wondered if maybe the trick is noticing that there's actually no bear at all, that it's just an email, or it's just an unanswered ask. Her insight led to this really great discussion that we had the other day about staying grounded in what's really happening, and then gently reminding ourselves that it's safe. We're doing deep dives into all of that in Growth Studio, but for the purposes of this podcast episode, a good place for you to start is just noticing the physical response of the emotion without allowing your brain to catastrophize the physical sensation that you're experiencing with stories, right? So it's just staying very present with your body and not allowing your brain to judge or to go off on a tangent or to start to try to make any sense at all of the emotion of the physical sensation of that emotion that you're experiencing. That's what I'm talking about when it's just being present with that emotion. I don't know about you, but I know that my brain can definitely be a drama queen sometimes. And when I recognize that and then I rein it in, I have so much more power over my circumstances. It is one of the biggest skills that I have developed in doing this work, and it has changed my life so much. So I want to bring in something really powerful that another one of the artists in Growth Studio, Monica, shared during the coaching call. She explained the biopsychosocial model, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's the idea that we're not just minds walking around in bodies. We're also deeply shaped by our environments and our communities. When we feel connected and safe with others, our nervous system has a bigger window of tolerance. We can handle more discomfort without shutting down. And Monica put it beautifully. She said the sociology of having a group, a community where you belong, you're safe, you're accepted, this expands what they call our window of tolerance. As part of her work, Monica leads people in cold plunges, and being in a trusted group where you belong expands your ability to take risks and to stay grounded. So you don't feel like you're jumping into the cold alone. You're jumping in with other people who've got your back. And that's exactly what we're doing with this challenge inside of Growth Studio. And it truly, truly makes all the difference. So as an example, another one of our members, Megan, shared how she just casually floated a creative idea for a mental health company, and they immediately jumped on it. So suddenly she was booked to lead a live art session and then asked to expand into longer workshops. And her reaction at first was like, oh my God, what have I done? Total panic, right? And by the way, that's just a very low-key freeze response of that, oh my God, what have I done? But the truth is, she was being asked to lead because she had something valuable to offer. She's still navigating that growth, but she's doing it. And that's the power of facing the discomfort without backing away. So we are facing these rejections, eyes wide open. And as we do that, we are building more and more tolerance for it. And I want to be really clear. It doesn't mean, again, I want to be super, super clear about this. None of this means that you will never feel rejection or that rejection will never sting or hurt. It just means that you will have a tolerance for it and you will learn to recognize that it's a sting that goes away and that you can be present with it. And the more present with it you are, the faster it goes away. And so there's not this big lead up to it. So it's part of our life as artists. Actually, it's part of our life as humans. But as artists, we're choosing to be in a profession where we are very likely to experience it often. We can look at that as something that we anticipate with fear and dread. And by anticipating it with fear and dread, we actively feel the very thing that we are dreading ahead of time, and we drag it out and prolong it. Because remember what I said earlier, your brain thinks that what you're imagining is actually happening. So when you're worrying about being rejected, you're actually experiencing the rejection ahead of time. Fun, right? That's how powerful our brains are. So here's a really good example of this. I tell this story often because I think it's just the perfect example of it. I don't like to go to the dentist and get a shot in my mouth. It kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I used to sit there and just, when I knew that I was going to have to get a shot, or when the dentist said like, okay, we're going to have to give you a shot, and then they leave the room and they come back in, that entire time I'm sitting there in the chair and my whole body is tense. And all I'm thinking is like, oh my God, I'm going to have to get a shot. I'm going to have to get a shot and it's going to hurt really bad. And this is going to be awful. And oh my God, I hate going to the dentist and blah, blah, blah. And all these stories. And I just will spin in that, right? that entire time, I am experiencing the discomfort of it. I'm imagining in detail how bad it's going to hurt. And then what happened was I started just being very present in the moment of the shot. And what I realized was it's a sharp prick that lasts a millisecond, followed by a very brief feeling of pressure, followed by nothing. Nothing. Absolute nothing. The entire physical sensation lasted at most 2 seconds. But what I did by anticipating the pain, bracing myself for it, and telling myself all the stories about how bad it was going to be, I created that experience of pain ahead of time, and I made it last hours sometimes instead of seconds, right? Or if I knew like a week ahead of time or 2 weeks ahead of time, I'm going to go to the dentist and they're going to give me a shot, I would be prolonging that pain and that discomfort for that entire time. So this whole challenge is more than just getting exposure to rejection and learning to deal with it. Although if that's all anyone gets out of it, their lives will change for the better. But the real benefit is not experiencing rejection. It's who you become when you willingly put yourself in situations, big or small, that require you to decide how you will experience the discomfort and growth. And who you are on the other side of that when the discomfort is gone and you are just experiencing the impact of that growth. It is powerful. So here's what I would love for you to try. And if you do, please tell me, when you feel rejection or when you feel an emotion that you don't want to feel or that you consider a negative emotion, pause and ask yourself, what am I making this mean? And then focus your attention on the physical experience without the narrative or the storytelling. The second you notice that you're telling a story, just stop, refocus your attention on your physical body. What is the physical sensation I'm feeling with this emotion? And then let your imagination run with a better story. Like, what if this turns out better than I expected? So whether it's applying to something new or sharing your work publicly or just asking for what you want, try it. You might hear a no. You might also hear a yes. But either way, you are building creative resilience. And here's one more story for you, because we have so many great stories coming out of Grow Studio. But Mary Chris talked about the intense resistance that she feels even before sending an email to seek some corporate work that she's working on. And she said, I can really feel my chest tighten. I can feel my throat tightening. I hear myself talking faster. Her whole nervous system braces against it. But she's learning to name those sensations and write the email anyway. And that's exactly the shift. Not pretending that it's easy and not making it any harder than it actually is, but doing it anyway, even with that discomfort. All right, that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode has helped you reframe how you think about rejection, I would love to hear from you. Send me a DM or share this episode with a fellow artist who needs to hear it. And if you want to do this work in community, you are so welcome to join us in Growth Studio. You will find a group of artists just like you, amazing, stretching themselves and learning how to take risks with confidence and having your own back. Okay, have a beautiful week, and I will talk to you soon.